Vyark Station was never quiet. Metal floors rang with heavy steps, engines hummed behind walls, and alien voices mixed into one cold noise that never slept. The station did not care who you were. Rich trader or poor refugee, it treated everyone the same, like dust drifting through space. In the center plaza, a small figure stood alone. She was very small even for her species. Her skin was soft blue, almost transparent under the bright station lights. Her eyes were wide and shining with fear. Her thin tail curled tightly around her leg as if trying to hide. Her name was Leary. She was only 5. 2 floating drones hovered near her, their red lights blinking slowly. Metal restraints lay open on the floor, waiting. The machines did not rush. They never needed to. Time always worked in their favor. Behind Leary, her mother was shaking. The alien woman's knees hit the floor with a dull sound. She dropped everything she carried, documents, food tokens, a small cloth toy, and crawled forward. Her hands were rough, cracked from years of hard labor. She grabbed the armored leg of the coalition enforcer standing before them. "Please," she begged in broken trade tongue. Her voice trembled, cracking with every word. "Please, she is only 5. The enforcer did not look down. Its armor was dark and smooth, without a single sign of emotion. A glowing slate hovered beside its shoulder, scrolling with cold blue text. "Subject L774, the enforcer read aloud. "Selected for labor relocation, quota requirement met." The words meant nothing to Leary. But they meant everything to her mother. "She cannot work," the mother cried. "She cannot even lift tools. She still wakes at night crying for light. She still needs me." Leary turned, confused. She reached out with small hands and clutched her mother's arm. "Ma," she whispered softly. That one word broke something inside the woman. The mother pulled her daughter close, wrapping her thin body around the child like a shield. Tears ran down her face and dripped onto the metal floor. "Take me instead," she said, her voice rising in desperation. "I am strong. I have worked all my life. I will go anywhere. I will do anything." She pressed her forehead against the cold ground. "Please," she whispered again, "let my child live." The plaza slowed around them. Aliens walking past glanced over, then quickly looked away. Some felt pity, some felt fear. Most felt relief that it was not their child being taken today. This happened every cycle. Children were easier to control, easier to move, easier to replace. The enforcer finally moved. Its head tilted slightly, as if considering her words. "Emotional appeals are irrelevant," it said. "Step aside." The drones floated closer. Leary began to cry. Small, quiet sobs shook her thin body. She hid her face in her mother's chest. The mother screamed. "No," she shouted, tightening her arms around the child. "You will not take her. You will have to kill me first." Her voice echoed through the plaza, sharp and raw. For a brief moment, the enforcer paused. Then its weapon unfolded from its arm with a mechanical click. The crowd stepped back. Fear spread like a wave. The mother closed her eyes and held her daughter tighter, whispering words of comfort she did not believe herself. "I am here," she whispered. "I am here." That was when a different sound broke through the fear. Footsteps. Not heavy, not mechanical. Human. A calm voice spoke from the edge of the crowd. "Hey." The enforcer turned. A human man stepped forward. His clothes were worn, marked with oil and dust. A simple station badge hung from his chest. His face was tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Let them go," the human said. The plaza fell silent, because humans were new. And humans were unpredictable. And for the first time that day, hope, small and fragile, sparked in the air. The human stood tall, even though he was average in height. His name was Daniel Reyes, and though he wore nothing special, just the worn uniform of a station worker, something about him made the plaza pause. Every alien froze, every drone stopped its slow, humming circle. Even the bright lights seemed to dim for a heartbeat. The enforcer's glowing eyes scanned him, calculating. This matter does not concern your species, it said. Its voice was metallic, echoing coldly through the hall. Step back, human, or face consequences. Daniel did not step back. His gaze stayed on the mother and her daughter. He saw Leary's trembling hands, her tiny sobs, the way she clung to her mother as if that small human touch could shield her from the universe. He saw the mother's cracked hands gripping nothing but hope. And he knew no algorithm or law could understand what fear and love truly meant. "It does concern me," Daniel said quietly. His voice carried through the plaza like calm water over stones. "Because that's a kid." The enforcer's head tilted, and its mechanical joints clicked. "Human laborers are prohibited from interfering in enforcement actions. Leave now." Daniel took one slow step forward. "I'm not leaving, I can't. She's five cycles. She doesn't understand what's happening, and she never should have to." The mother's head turned. She blinked through tears. "Human, please," she whispered. "You don't have to risk yourself for us." Daniel crouched slightly so he was closer to Leary's level. "Hey there," he said softly. "It's okay, you're not alone." He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I've got you." Leary looked up at him, eyes wide, full of confusion and fear. You help me," she whispered, barely audible. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "I'll make sure nothing happens to you." The enforcer's weapon shifted slightly, aiming toward him now. "Step aside, human. Interference is punishable." Daniel met its glowing eyes without fear. "Then punish me, but you're not taking her." For a moment the plaza seemed suspended in time. The distant engines hummed, but no one moved. Even the other aliens stayed frozen, unsure if the humans' words were foolish or brave. The mother's voice cracked. "You don't understand. She broke off, shaking her head. "You could die." Daniel shook his head slowly. "I know, but she's just a kid, and I can't let them take her." He glanced at Leary, then back at her mother. "She has a life to live. She deserves a chance." The drones moved closer, their sensors glowing red. The enforcer's mechanical arms shifted into a defensive stance. "You underestimate the consequences," it warned. Daniel's gaze hardened. "Then I accept the consequences." The mother pressed her face against her daughter's head, crying silently. She did not understand humans. She did not understand why one would risk everything for another species. But something in her chest told her this one was different. Leary's small hand reached out, brushing Daniel's arm. The human knelt slightly and gently took her tiny fingers in his own. She trembled, but for the first time she felt a flicker of safety. "Hold on," Daniel whispered. "I'm not leaving you." The enforcer paused. It processed data, calculated probabilities. Human defiance was new, unpredictable, dangerous in ways that simple law could not control. It had never encountered this kind of choice. Daniel stood tall again. "I'm ready, you take me instead. That's fair, isn't it?" The plaza fell silent except for the distant hum of engines. The mother's eyes widened, hope and fear mingling in her gaze. She wanted to protest. She wanted to beg him to leave. But she couldn't. Deep down, she knew he was humanity itself in action, bold, fearless, and unwilling to let the small and weak suffer. The drones edged closer. The enforcer's weapon hummed. But Daniel did not move. He simply stared, unwavering. And in that moment, the law of the stars, the cold, unfeeling rules of the galaxy, met something it had never calculated before: courage. And courage, for the first time that day, made the galaxy pause. Daniel's eyes never left Leary. He could feel her tiny body trembling against her mother's chest, could hear the soft, ragged gasps of fear she tried to hide. Every step the enforcer took, every hum of the drones, seemed to push a weight down onto his shoulders, but he did not flinch. He had made a choice, one that could cost him everything. "You will not take her," Daniel said, his voice calm but steady. "Not today, not ever." The enforcer's glowing eyes narrowed. "This human refuses compliance. Protocol requires intervention." Its weapon shifted, a metal arm extending toward him. "Resistance will result in immediate subjugation." Daniel took a slow, deliberate breath. He crouched to meet Leary's gaze again, trying to speak to her without scaring her further. "Hey, little one, I know you're scared. I know you don't understand all of this, but I promise I won't let anything happen to you. You just hold on, okay?" Leary blinked at him. Her tiny fingers clutched at her mother's chest, then slowly reached out to brush Daniel's hand. The warmth of his touch, human and soft, was foreign to her but comforting. Something in her stomach uncurled a little. She still cried quietly, but for the first time since the enforcer had arrived, she felt that someone was truly on her side. The mother shook her head frantically. "No, you cannot do this. You don't understand what they will do to you." Her voice was high, panicked. "Please, I beg you, leave them, leave me, take me instead." Daniel looked at her, then back at Leary. He shook his head slowly. "I can't leave her, I can't leave either of you. I'll do whatever it takes. That's all I can do." The enforcer moved closer. The drone's sensors glowed brighter, scanning his body. "Probability of survival, low. Resistance is irrational. Human will be neutralized." Daniel straightened. His shoulders squared and his voice carried through the plaza like a firm tide. "Then go ahead, try, but if you touch them, I won't go quietly. You'll regret it." The plaza was silent. Not a single alien moved. Even the background hum of machinery seemed distant. Other aliens watched, stunned by the audacity of this human. One human, standing against an unyielding force, and yet he did not tremble, he did not hesitate. The mother's hands shook as she pressed them against her chest. She couldn't believe this. How could one human stand so firmly, so fearlessly, when the entire galaxy's law pressed down upon him? She saw something in his eyes that she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Pure, unbroken hope. Daniel looked down at Leary again. "I'll take her place," he said, soft but clear. "I'll go wherever they want me to go. You let her live, that's all I ask." Leary's tiny lips trembled as tears fell freely. "You really help me?" she whispered. Her voice was so small it seemed to vanish into the hum of the station. "Yes," Daniel said, "always." The enforcer paused, analyzing. This behavior was unprecedented. No human in its database had ever volunteered for replacement. No human had ever risked their own life to save a non-human child. The calculations didn't make sense. Risk was too high. Survival odds too low, yet the human did not waver. The mother clutched Daniel's hand, her own shaking. "No, you cannot do this. I cannot let you." Daniel's eyes were gentle now, but firm. "You will," he said. "Because it is right. She is a child, she deserves a chance, and I can give it to her." For the first time that day, the drones hesitated. The enforcer's weapon lowered slightly, though its mechanical fingers twitched with uncertainty. Somewhere deep inside its programming, it recognized a variable it could not compute: courage coupled with compassion. The plaza seemed to hold its breath. Even distant traders and workers paused. Every eye turned toward the small human standing between life and death. Daniel took a deep breath and stood tall. "I'm ready, take me, but leave her. She's too young, she's too small. She's too alive to be taken by your laws." Leary's mother pressed her face to her daughter's head, sobbing. The small child clung to both of them, her body shaking, but her eyes held a glimmer of trust. Somewhere deep in the midst of fear, hope had found a home. The enforcer's eyes glowed brighter, whirring sounds filling the plaza as calculations ran at lightning speed. But Daniel did not move. He only stood there, human, defiant, fearless. Because he had chosen. And sometimes in the cold, indifferent galaxy, one choice was enough to change everything. The enforcer's mechanical limbs shifted, aiming its weapon squarely at Daniel. Drones circled closer, their red sensors sweeping over his body like cold eyes. The air in the plaza felt heavier, as if the station itself were holding its breath. Daniel's gaze stayed locked on Leary. He could see every tiny tremble, every silent tear on her face. She was so small, so fragile, and she was counting on him. "Step aside, human," the enforcer said, its voice flat and metallic. "Resistance is not permitted. Compliance is mandatory." Daniel took a slow, deep breath. He crouched down again, lowering himself so his eyes met Leary. He spoke softly, gently. "Hey, little one, I know you're scared. I know this doesn't make sense, but I promise no one is going to hurt you, not while I'm here." Leary's eyes were wide with disbelief. Could someone really be willing to risk their life for hers? The tiny hope that had sparked earlier grew slightly, warming her chest. She pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, but her small hand reached out again, touching Daniel. His fingers were big, warm, and strong, and for the first time she felt that safety wasn't just a word. The mother shook her head violently. "You don't understand," she cried, her voice breaking. "If you interfere, if you try, they will." Her words faltered as tears streamed down her face. "You could die. I cannot let you do this." Daniel looked at her with a calm intensity that made her stop speaking. "I know," he said softly, "but she doesn't get a choice. She's 5 years old, 5, she hasn't lived yet, she can't fight, she can't survive there. I have to do this, it's the right thing." The drones moved closer, buzzing with mechanical precision. The enforcer's weapon hummed and shifted to a threatening position. Probability of survival is minimal. Human choice is illogical. Daniel straightened his shoulders. "Then the risk is mine, that's all I can give. I'll go wherever you want. I'll do whatever you ask, but she stays." The mother's chest heaved as she stared at him, panic and gratitude colliding. She wanted to beg him to leave, to run, to save himself, but something in her told her she couldn't. She couldn't take away someone else's courage. She couldn't take away someone's choice to protect her child. "Please," she whispered, her voice tiny now. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know who you are, but please survive." Daniel knelt again, placing a hand gently on Leary's tiny head. "I'll be okay," he said. "I'll tell stories, I'll make it through. You just promise me something, grow up brave. Don't forget that someone cared enough to protect you." Leary's lips trembled, but she nodded faintly. Her tiny fingers tightened around his hand. For a moment the plaza was still except for her soft breaths and his steady words. The enforcer paused, its glowing eyes flickering. It had never seen a human act like this before. No threat, no weapon, no negotiation, just a choice, a conscious, deliberate choice to face death to protect someone else. Calculations began to run again faster than ever. Risk, probability, survival, consequences, but the numbers didn't account for courage. The numbers didn't account for human empathy. Daniel stood tall once more, his voice echoing through the plaza. "I'm ready, you want me? Take me, I won't resist, but she is not yours, not today, not ever." Leary's mother sank to her knees, sobbing into the child's back. I can't. How can one human be this brave?" she whispered, her chest heaving. "How can they risk everything for a child who isn't even theirs?" Daniel's gaze softened, but his resolve did not waver. "Because someone has to," he said. "Because if I don't, who will?" The drones hovered silently, sensors scanning, lights blinking. The enforcer hesitated. Something it had never processed before unfolded before its optical lenses, selfless choice. A variable it had no protocol for. For the first time, the plaza felt like it belonged to someone else. Not the law, not the machines, not the cold rules of the galaxy. It belonged to courage, love, and hope. And Daniel stood firmly in its center, a human unshaken, unafraid, unbroken. Leary pressed her tiny face against her mother's shoulder and whispered softly, almost to herself, "He's protecting me." The mother nodded through her tears, gripping her daughter close. Somewhere deep in her chest, a fragile spark of belief ignited. Maybe, just maybe, there were still beings in the galaxy who would fight for the small, the weak, and the innocent. Daniel had chosen. And sometimes that one choice, against all odds, against cold law, against machines, was enough to change the course of everything. The enforcer shifted but did not attack. The drones hovered uncertain. And in that moment the humans' courage shone brighter than the metal walls around them, brighter than any law, brighter than fear itself. Because some choices are more powerful than armies. Some choices are human. Daniel's stance did not falter even as the enforcer processed his defiance. Machines calculated probabilities, ran risk assessments, and searched their databases for precedent. They found none. No human had ever volunteered to take a child's place, to risk their life for someone they barely knew. The concept was alien, dangerous, illogical, and yet here he was, one human, standing tall against a galaxy that measured value by obedience, not courage. The mother clutched Leary tightly, whispering words she didn't think could reach Daniel through the chaos. "I can't believe this. How can someone be this brave?" She pressed her forehead to her child's hair, wishing she could bottle the moment, hold it forever. Leary's small fingers curled into her mother's chest, trembling, yet for the first time she felt safe. The enforcer's voice was flat but uncertain. Human laborers have historically high mortality rates under forced relocation conditions. Survival is improbable. Resistance is illogical. Daniel stepped forward slowly, letting his eyes meet the machine's glowing gaze. "I know," he said. "I've calculated that too, but it doesn't matter, because no child should be taken when they are this small, not when they have a life to live." The plaza was quiet now. Even the crowds of aliens who had been moving and whispering stopped. Some were shocked, some were afraid. Some, deep down, felt a stirring of admiration they had never allowed themselves to feel before. This human, this single human, was challenging the galaxy's rules with nothing but courage. The enforcer made a soft mechanical click running through its protocols. Risk, excessive. Probability of failure, high. Outcome, unknown. Human choice is anomalous. Daniel knelt slightly to touch Leary's hand once more. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm going to be fine. You just promise me one thing: grow strong, be brave. Don't ever forget that someone cared enough to protect you." Leary's eyes were wide with wonder. "You really mean it?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Daniel said, "always." The mother sobbed quietly but nodded, a mix of relief and disbelief coursing through her. She could not understand why a human, someone from a distant world, someone with no ties to her family, would risk everything for her child. But she knew one thing: this human was different. The galaxy would never forget this. The drones buzzed closer, sensing movement, ready to act. The enforcer hesitated, its sensors flickering. It had never encountered a variable like Daniel before. He was not aggressive. He was not deceptive. He was not attempting escape or negotiation. He was simply willing to face death to protect another. That made him unpredictable, dangerous, and in the calculus of the galaxy, impossible to ignore. Daniel straightened and faced the enforcer fully. "Take me," he said, voice steady, "if you want, but she is not yours, not today, not ever." The mother pressed her face into Leary's hair, whispering thanks that she feared would never reach Daniel. But somehow, even in the distance, she hoped he could hear her. "Thank you for everything. I cannot repay you, but I will never forget this." Word of Daniel's defiance spread faster than the machines could calculate. Rumors traveled through the station. A human had risked his life for an alien child. Other species listened, and in hushed tones discussed what this meant. Humans were no longer just new, quiet neighbors. They were bold, fearless, and willing to fight for those weaker than themselves. Across distant systems, human colonies and traders took notice. This single act of courage began to build a reputation. Humans would not stand idle while injustice ruled. They would interfere, they would protect, and they would be remembered. The enforcer's weapon lowered slightly, though its movements were still precise and calculating. It did not fully understand this anomaly, but it understood enough to pause. The human had forced hesitation, something the galaxy's machines and soldiers had rarely experienced. Daniel looked down at Leary once more. "Stay safe," he whispered, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Grow strong, live well, that's all I ask." The mother could barely speak, but her heart was full. "She will live," she whispered. "Because of you, one human, one life changed everything for her." Daniel straightened, letting the crowd watch him. His courage, his choice, and his humanity spread through the plaza like a quiet fire. And in that fire, every alien present realized something. Humans did not measure worth by law, rank, or species. Humans measured it by courage, compassion, and the willingness to protect the small, even if it cost them everything. And for the first time that day, the galaxy began to respect humans, not for their power, not for their technology, but for their hearts. Because one human had made a choice. And that choice would echo across the stars. Daniel was taken immediately after the exchange was approved. The drones and the enforcer did not hesitate this time. He did not struggle. He did not beg. He walked steadily, holding his head high, leaving Leary and her mother behind. The mother's sobs echoed in his ears as he was led through cold corridors toward the transport ships bound for the labor moon. Leary pressed her tiny hands to the glass barrier separating them, tears streaming down her face. "Wait, come back," she cried. Daniel gave her a small wave, a reassuring smile, though his heart ached. "I'll be okay, live strong, little one." The labor moon was nothing like the station. It was a barren rock, winds whipping through metal cages and the sun a harsh, unrelenting glare. The air was thin and hard to breathe. Work was grueling, unending. Machines operated by alien supervisors demanded efficiency with no concern for the humans' limits. Many failed. Many did not last the first cycle, but Daniel endured. He learned to lift heavier loads, to endure longer hours, to push past exhaustion, all while keeping the memory of Leary alive in his mind. Each task, no matter how small, was done with the thought of protecting her life. Other humans on the moon noticed him. They whispered among themselves, impressed by his courage, inspired by his choice. He shared food with the weaker ones, comforted those who were injured, and told stories from Earth, tales of ordinary humans doing extraordinary things. Slowly, respect grew, not because of rank or strength, but because of the selfless choice he had made. The aliens supervising him could not understand his motivations. They watched, confused and frustrated, as he performed feats of strength and endurance that many deemed impossible. He did not seek reward. He did not seek recognition. He worked to survive and to honor the promise he had made to a small alien child far across the galaxy. Back on Vyark's station, news spread of what had happened. Other species began talking quietly among themselves. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "A human gave their life to save a child?" "Impossible," another replied. "Yet the reports are verified. The human volunteered." The story traveled quickly, spreading through trading posts, stations, and colonies. Humans were no longer just newcomers. They were beings of courage, willing to sacrifice themselves for the innocent. Daniel endured hardship, and yet he found small victories. He healed injured coworkers, shared food rations, and became a quiet leader among the laborers. Each cycle that passed, he remembered Leary. Her face, her tiny hands, her frightened eyes, he carried them like a flame inside him. That memory kept him moving, kept him working, kept him alive. Months turned into cycles, and Daniel survived where others would have fallen. His body was scarred, his muscles weary, but his spirit remained unbroken. And somewhere deep inside, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The child was alive. That was enough. That was worth every ache, every bruise, every long night under the harsh sun of the labor moon. The reputation of humans began to grow not only in whispers but in respect. Aliens who once disregarded human opinions began to pause when they spoke. News of one human's courage traveled faster than any official decree. It was proof. Humans did not only survive. Humans inspired. Humans changed the rules without needing authority or power. They acted with courage and compassion. And back on Vyark's station, Leary grew taller, stronger, and braver with every cycle. She would never forget the human who had given everything so she could live. Her mother told her stories of Daniel's sacrifice, of how one human had stood against the cold machinery of the galaxy and refused to let fear rule. That story became a part of her, a reminder that courage existed even in the darkest times, that someone cared enough to protect the smallest, the weakest, and the most innocent. Daniel's body was far away, laboring and suffering, but his choice had planted a seed that would grow across the galaxy. One human, one child saved, one act of courage that reminded everyone, sometimes the smallest decision, the bravest heart, and the simplest promise can change the fate of many. And in that knowledge, Daniel endured, knowing that while the cost was high, the reward, the life he had saved, was priceless. Years passed, but the memory of Daniel Ray's did not fade. Leary grew tall and strong, her small body now agile and confident. Her mother always reminded her of the human who had risked everything for her life. "Remember him, Leary," she said often, her voice soft but firm. "Because he showed us what courage truly is. Because of him, you live." Because of him, the galaxy learned something important. Leary never forgot. She carried Daniel's bravery in her heart. Every time she saw injustice, every time someone tried to harm the weak or the small, she remembered the human who had given himself so she could grow up free. And she decided that she would honor him, not with sadness, but with strength, compassion, and action. Back on Vyark's station, changes began slowly. Policies that had allowed children to be taken for labor were questioned. Officials debated quietly. Traders and merchants whispered. Aliens who had once thought humanity naive began to think differently. Humans were not naive. Humans were fearless. Humans acted when no one else would. Daniel's story had spread across the galaxy. It was no longer just one act. It had become a symbol. a symbol that a single human could stand against cold rules and unfeeling machines, and in doing so could make the universe pause and reflect. Laws were rewritten. Labor quotas were reduced. Children were no longer considered mere resources. One human had sparked a change that no law could have achieved alone. On the labor moon, Daniel was scarred, tired, and far from home, but he heard of the changes. The news reached him slowly, through whispers, reports, and messages from allies he had made during his years of labor. The galaxy had started to respect humans not for their strength, not for their technology, but for their hearts. And he smiled quietly to himself. He had endured pain, hunger, and hardship, but every sacrifice had been worth it. Leary was alive. The innocent had been saved. Back on Vyerk's station, Leary and her mother stood together at a gathering meant to honor the new laws protecting children. Leary's eyes scanned the crowd, imagining Daniel's face among them. "He did this for me," she whispered to her mother. "He didn't have to, but he did. He gave me a life." Her mother held her close, tears in her eyes. "Yes, my child, one human, one brave heart changed everything for you and for countless others. Never forget that." The chamber was silent as officials announced the new decrees. No child could be taken for labor. No species could claim the weak as tools. And in that moment, every alien present realized something they had never fully understood. Courage and compassion could reshape the galaxy. Far away on the labor moon, Daniel continued his work. He was tired, worn, and his body bore the marks of harsh labor, but his spirit was strong. He thought of Leary often, imagining her growing up brave and free. And he knew, quietly in his heart, that his choice had mattered. It had mattered more than he could have ever imagined. Because one human had stood between life and death, fear and hope, despair and courage. One human had made a decision that no law, no army, and no machine could undo. And that was enough. In the galaxy, humans became known not just for their power, but for their heart. Their willingness to protect the small, to fight for justice, and to sacrifice for others became a legend whispered across stars. Parents told their children the story. Leaders remembered it when making laws. Children dreamed of being brave like the human who had chosen to save Leary. And somewhere far from Vyerk's station, Daniel Reyes looked up at the stars. He was tired, he was scarred, he had suffered, but he smiled. He had no regrets, because the galaxy had learned something precious. Humanity is measured not by might, but by the courage to protect the innocent. And that courage had changed everything. The stars, once indifferent, now seemed to shine a little brighter. For the first time, the galaxy listened, not to law, not to power, but to the bravery of one human heart. And that was enough to make the universe better.